We are so honored today to have Jóhannes with us. He is truly a hero and a warrior. This man has withstood death threats, attempts on his life. He is a whistleblower to be honored. Jóhannes, so good to have you with us on National Whistleblowing Week. And thank you for appearing. And we'd like to know, how can we help one another in the whistleblowing world?
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. You know, we whistleblowers, the more united we get, the stronger we are to fight injustice and see this world change to better. And there are thankfully many whistleblowers out there who constantly brings attention to all the challenges whistleblowers go through and all the risks they face for their well-being and safety. And you know, one example is my dear friend, the FBI whistleblower Jane Turner. She unites us a lot, and she initiates communications and contacts, which brings us all closer. And thankfully, we are many who want to see whistleblowers more united, because we are powerful together, and we stand together. The more we stand together, the more results we will get.
Wise words. Oh, Jóhannes, wise words. And what words of support or advice would you give to other whistleblowers?
Yeah, for other whistleblowers, I mean, for me, if they are taking the first steps to become a whistleblower, go to the internet, start searching for advices and guidance to be a whistleblower, because there is a lot of information on the internet, and that was very useful for me to begin with before I became public, and contact many of the organizations who support whistleblowers, or lawyers, or other individuals, or organizations fighting corruption like Transparency International, because if they don't know, they will direct you and guide you. Take your time to take the decision, because there's a lot of sacrifices. There's a long journey ahead, and you will need all advices and guidance you can get. Think about your decision very well, because it's going to have a huge impact on your well-being and your safety and people around you. But it's worth it, and the journey is long, and it will change your life forever.
Yes, it will, and you know that more than most. And what would you like to tell people about whistleblowers, Jóhannes?
Whistleblowers are someone who have a very strong conscience and moral compass. And it's, you know, the conscience is a very powerful tool in the people's mind. And it drives whistleblowers to do the right thing. Keep in mind, there are many people who don't do it, but the whistleblowers, they take the decision to do the right thing because they believe they need to fight injustice and need to fight the crimes committed and all the wrongdoings. The conscience is the driving tool for any whistleblower, and they do this knowing there's going to be a big sacrifices. There's going to be big attacks on them personally, even physically. There's going to be a lonely journey, but their conscience tells them you have to do the right thing. And what I can tell you, I have gone through a lot, but you know, this is a far best decision I have made in my life, and it gives the life such a big meaning to be in the journey to do the right thing. And I'm really happy with my decision, and I know many of my fellow whistleblowers, they are so happy with the decision, even though they have faced prison time, they have been tried to be killed, and they have lost their livelihood, they're living on nothing, they have been, you know, the list is long, but in the end of the day, their conscience tell them, you know, that was the right thing, and they are happy with the decision.
I'll have to mention, Jóhannes, out of just a ton of whistleblowers I know, you probably are the one that has really suffered the most. I mean, physically, you're living within the same country as the company you blew the whistle on. This is so admirable. Jóhannes, I just want you to know, when you look in the dictionary under hero, there's a picture of you. I thank you so much for your time today. You truly are a hero.
Thank you very much, Jen. You know, I mean, because I've seen the picture of you there, so thank you.
Goodbye, my friend.
Goodbye.
So here we have Sandy Kuba, the Disney whistleblower. Such an honor to have you on during National Whistleblower Week. Sandy, you are a warrior. You are a hero in every sense of the word. We want to ask you, how can we help one another in the whistleblowing world?
Well, I think one of the things is that whistleblowers and families, of course, need all the emotional support they can get. But one thing I did want to bring up was about how they need extra help a lot of times in obtaining legal representation for those whistleblowers that are coming up against the Goliaths. I think, as everyone knows, I had a very hard time in getting someone that was, gutsy enough to, join me in this fight. And so, I mean, a lot of attorneys will say they'll come up against Goliaths, but then there's some Goliaths they will not come up against. And that's one thing, is that, trying to find that legal representation has been a big area for those that are coming up against the large corporations, because sometimes it is, like I said, almost impossible to find that. And it took me a long, long time, as you know. And the really difficult thing about that is when these individuals cannot find the help that they need, it really makes them more vulnerable to the abuse by the corporation.
Yeah.
And they'll make more mistakes because they can't find the legal counsel. They can obtain the legal counsel that they need to help guide them, through all these pitfalls. So I think that those are some areas where I really feel, in addition to the fact of just helping them find jobs, and that's been a difficult thing.
But what words of support or advice would you give to other whistleblowers?
Well, for one thing, one of the things that I did recently for those that cannot find legal representation, or even those that have found it, even if they have found it, but certainly, in that meantime, I suggested to a woman named Zonia Book. She was a justice fighter against Disney's many employment law violations, including their toxic employee list. I had suggested that she start a site and that a portion include what I call the Disney Survival Guide, which will include those do's and don'ts in whistleblowing. And so she has included that on her site just recently, and you can find links to that. You'll find them in her web, to that website, as far as both in LinkedIn and Facebook under both her name. It'll be under my name as well pretty soon. You'll find it under the name Violet Spencer, and you'll also particularly Violet Spencer has a page that she has set up for my husband Robert Kuba, as you know, who committed suicide due to the abuse by Disney against both myself and my family. So that's out there. We're going to get those links out there, to try to help them to navigate what I would say is very much a landmine, and in between being able to find legal counsel, at least to help to try to give them some guidance. So that's one thing. The other thing I want whistleblowers to really understand is that OSHA is assigned to protect whistleblowers, and unfortunately, they don't always do that. It's 6 months. To me, it was 6 months of wasted time, but because they didn't even interview me, they really did no investigation, and they were actually, really just protecting the company. And they do that a lot, unfortunately, but it is required. So that's one piece of advice I have to tell them, to watch that deadline. They have about 180 days to report a SOX whistleblower to OSHA, and they have less than that for other types of whistleblowers. So look that up, make certain that they get that whistleblower in the meantime. And again, they will sign most of the time with the company, but especially large companies. And I have been told that there was one instance of a large company, in fact, it was Disney, that the OSHA person, investigator, that was actually trying to help the whistleblower, and they ended up losing their job. So there has been a lot of things. So I do want to make certain that they are aware, that the whistleblowers are aware of that they do need to contact OSHA. It does have to stay there for 6 months. And you have to give them that opportunity. After that, if they don't make a decision, you're welcome to withdraw it, and you, after you withdraw it from OSHA, you go leave it there for the whole 6 months, then you can take it out, and you have up to 4 years from the time you were terminated to take it to court. Everything.
And she ended up, what would you like to tell people about whistleblowers, Sandy?
What I like to tell people about whistleblowers is that a whistleblower is really the best friend a company has, because they're telling the company what they need to hear and not what they want to hear. Yes, people are dangerous in an organization. They promote collusion, fraud, circumvention of internal controls, and manipulation of data. Again, that's because, you know, they're all going to move up the ladder together. And when the whistleblower emerges, these same yes people are going to get together and join together against that whistleblower as well. Because after all, they don't want to lose, you know, a good thing. They're, you know, what they're doing is, you know, making themselves look good. It means better ratings. It means better raises, higher raises. It means promotions. And helping to get a whistleblower terminated, creating a hostile work environment for them, and harassing them, and a host of other attacks against the whistleblower are actually considered retaliation. And with that, you are actually subjecting yourself to a felony. That's a felony. You also need to understand that, but those are the main things I wanted to talk about. Like I said, don't look at the whistleblower as being the snitch or the bad guy. Quite the contrary. They are telling it like it is, and they're giving you an opportunity to correct things on the inside where nobody else has to know. Take advantage of that, fix it, and go on with life.
Thank you, Sandy Kuba, Disney whistleblower extraordinaire. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
We are so happy to have Joe Carson, Department of Energy whistleblower. Joe, it's good to see you. Welcome to National Whistleblower Week. We're delighted.
Well, it's great to be with you. Thank you for inviting me, and more importantly, Jane, my message. I think my message is much more important than me personally.
Well, you certainly have had that message out there for a long time, and you refuse to back down. And I would like to ask you, how can we help one another in the whistleblower world?
Well, Jane, well, my first point is regarding the Office of Special Counsel, and it's Senate confirmed, the Special Counsel of the Office of Special Counsel, who by law has to be an attorney. This agency, created in 1979 specifically to protect federal whistleblowers from reprisal, I publicly claim, regardless of risk to my job or my professional engineering license, it's a decades-long law-breaking fraud of a federal law enforcement agency.
What words of support or advice would you give to other whistleblowers then?
So I'm doing this for whistleblowers. We have to be looking out for ourselves, not just our own individual case, but for other cases too.
Excellent points, Joe. Excellent points. What would you like to tell people about whistleblowers?
Okay, that's question 3. You're ahead of me, Jane. All right. All right, I'm coming from a Christian worldview with this, okay? And I've been a whistleblower now for 30 years. I'm still on my feet, all right? And why? I see whistleblowers, we're not just prophets. We're not just lamplighters. We're not just truth tellers. Whistleblowers, we are redeemers of our societal institutions and their respective missions for our common good. We whistleblowers, we are guardians and saviors of humanity and civilization. Whistleblowers are those of whom it can be fairly said, as quoting Jesus in the gospel, greater love hath no man that he lays down his life for his friends. That's what whistleblowers do. And we look at friend or neighbor as the way in the parable of the Good Samaritan. People we don't know, people who might live halfway around the world, people who might live 100 years in the future. We are sacrificing voluntarily our lives, not our physical lives, so much time, treasure, money, health, etc., jobs, careers, to do our duty, to basically be guardians of this humanity. We have 8 billion people on a fragile planet. We need trustworthy societal institutions, or we are finished as a civilization. And whistleblowers are essential parts of the immune system of these societal entities to keep them more trustworthy in their missions, for respective missions for our common good. So we're the immune system, and frequently, if you study immune systems, the white blood cells, they sacrifice themselves, and we whistleblowers do the same thing frequently. We see something wrong, and we sacrifice ourselves to expose and end it. So we are the redeemers, not just the truth tellers.
Joe Carson, extremely wise information and advice, and we thank you for your time. And I have no doubt once you get to heaven, the person at the door is going to say, "Job well done."
Well,
Thank
thank you, Jane, but I'm more important than saying 100 years from now, this planet's not a burnt out cinder. I'd rather have my descendants saying, "You were a good ancestor."
Yes, sir. Thank
All
you
right,
for your
thank you.
time.
Thank you, Jane.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Noel, good morning. It's awful nice to see you. And you are from Ireland, which is a long way from here, but we are delighted to have you join us on National Whistleblowing Day. And could you tell us, Noel, how we can help one another in the whistleblowing world?
Absolutely. Good morning to you, and thanks for having me on. And Ireland is a long way away, but whistleblowing problems are an international problem and they're the same worldwide. Look, at a phrase I've come up against, and I think whistleblowers come up against quite a lot, is lessons have been learned. That phrase usually refers to an assumption that the organization or the employer has learned lessons from what the whistleblower has exposed to ensure that the concern is going to be resolved appropriately. But in reality, what is occurring is employers and organizations are learning lessons in how to deal with whistleblowers and how to negate the problems that whistleblowers can cause for an organization. And I think what whistleblowing networks, what whistleblowing groups, what support groups for whistleblowers need to do is we need to learn lessons. We need to learn the lessons of how to better respond to these strategies that are employed against whistleblowers. We need to understand how strategies are employed by an organization or an employer and maybe described as an error or a maladministration, but in effect, they're learned processes, they're learned strategies. So in my own experience, it was common practice for me to be removed from the payroll when I was reporting the concerns that I did. Very often this was described as an error, maladministration. Through talking to other whistleblowers from other organizations, other industries, through some of the networks that I engage with, I discovered that this is a very common practice towards whistleblowers, and it became obvious that it was actually a learned practice by employers to weaken the whistleblower and to discipline the whistleblower and to punish them for what they were doing. And it was much more difficult for the employers and the organizations to get away with the defense of just an error when you showed that this was occurring in other industries to other whistleblowers unconnected to our own. So what I would suggest to how do we help one another in the whistleblowing world? We do that by speaking to each other, by learning the lessons from each other's experience, from teaching each other the successful strategies that we've employed, and becoming like the organizations and employers we're up against and learning lessons.
That is excellent advice, Noel. And what words of support or advice would you like to give to other whistleblowers?
I think the most important piece of advice I would ever give to a whistleblower is to always, always, always tell the truth. Being honest, it's probably what got us in trouble in the first place, is that we're truth speakers. But I would advise people to stick with it. You're going to come up against a defense by your organization, your employer, whatever, and they're going to engage in lies and misinformation and all these type of strategies. Don't fall into that trap. You stick to your guns, you keep telling the truth. The truth is like the tide in the ocean. It keeps coming, it keeps eroding away bit by bit by bit, and it does work. It gets there in the end. It mightn't feel like it at times. You'll have dark days and you'll wonder, you know, did you do the right thing? And is there an easier way out of this? But my advice is stick with it, keep telling the truth. It's a bit like the TV cop shows, you know, they have the guy in interrogation and they keep asking the same questions over and over again. And the reason you're told that occurs is because it's much easier to tell the truth than it is to keep telling a lie. So don't fall into the trap of doing what they're doing to you. Stay with it, keep telling the truth. It might be difficult on day one, it might be difficult on day 101, but you'll find eventually it comes around, it will repay you. So that would definitely be my most important piece of advice to whistleblowers. Tell the truth, keep telling the truth.
Excellent. And Noel, tell us, what is the state of whistleblowing in Ireland?
So the big development in Ireland, I suppose, at the moment is that as an EU state, we're subject to EU laws and regulations as well as our own national laws. And as so often happens within the EU, each country will have its own unique way of approaching a law or an act or a problem or an issue. And over time, and again, this famous phrase, from the lessons learned from these individual countries' approach, there's an effort to come up with the best strategy for a European-wide approach, and it's then employed by the European Union so that we have a cohesion and everyone has an understanding, regardless of what country you're in, as to what the law is. They're currently doing that with whistleblowing law. So the Irish example, which is called the Protected Disclosures Act, it came in 2014, is identified as being a particularly strong act. I might argue against that as somebody that has suffered the consequences of whistleblowing and didn't feel like I got much protection from the act, but nonetheless, the academics and the lawyers will suggest that it's a very strong law, and it has guided a lot of the contents of what the European Act is proposing. So that should have been in place December 2021. As happens so often with bureaucracy and politics and everything, they're late in transposing it into Irish law, but nonetheless it's there. We know what's coming because everyone's aware of what that EU directive is. Probably the most significant piece within it, for me personally anyway, it reverses the burden of proof. So within Europe, under this EU directive, it will no longer be necessary for a whistleblower to prove that they were penalized for raising a concern. The burden of proof will be reversed. So the penalization is accepted unless the employer can prove otherwise. So this would be very, very significant. I mean, we're all familiar with the phrase that you're innocent until proven guilty. Effectively, what this law brings in is that the employer is guilty until they can prove they're innocent. And that can be a very difficult burden for an employer to prove, because as we're all probably aware, it's an extremely difficult burden for individual whistleblowers up till now, that they've had the burden on them to prove that they were penalized, that the mistreatment they suffered was related to the whistleblowing that they'd done. All these measures are placed on us. All that burden is placed on us at the moment. So the European directive will reverse that, which is, of course, to be welcomed, but as yet it's not in force.
Thank you, Noel, one of Ireland's heroes and warriors. We appreciate it very much, and thank you for your sacrifices. Bobby, this is such an honor to have you on your little vignette for National Whistleblower Week. And I am delighted to have you here because you're one of the few whistleblowers that lost your job because you stood up for other people. So I'm going to ask you, Bobby, how can we help one another in the whistleblower world?
Well, thank you, Jane, for that. And of course, off the top of my head is you were the first person to connect with me. When we connected on LinkedIn, I was very afraid to go out there and talk to people, you know, because you can't trust anybody and you get confused. And plus, you know, I was from New York. I didn't trust the media or TV or anything like that.
Yeah.
But you called me, and you were the first person, and you walked me down that path of talking to other people and connecting with different people and educating myself and learning about what I'm going through. Because I after going through all this and still being involved in it, I needed somebody like you. You're an expert, you're a smart person, and you care. And that's the biggest thing. And you have to trust other people, even though your stomach is so tight and afraid. but you have to go with that and feel it out and talk to people. And of course, thank goodness I had my wife and my parents and my family and friends and even old coworkers. I mean, the support of everybody, but they never were involved in something so bad when the government, the agency you work for, you gave your life to, and that you were betrayed. I feel it was just betrayed. And that's like a demon. It's the betrayal demon that's in your head all day long. And you feel like a loser and disappointed and ashamed. But the best thing in the world is having you and the organization and having such smart people there that I could reach out to and talk to and guide me and help me with this. And then you have to have a lawyer and lawyers and experts, and you can never give up. No. Even, and thank goodness, Jane, I cried. There was times I was talking to you,
I know.
It crushes you because it just, but you need people. You need people to help you. Even though you don't want to ask for help, you need people to help you.
And Bobby, you become kind of an expert on your own with this, with what you've gone through. People now call you. And so what kind of words of support or advice would you give to other whistleblowers?
Well, thank you. Yes. And then I didn't want to be an expert at this, and it's a whole different field because you don't realize how many people go through different legal fights from being a whistleblower in so many different fields. So like me dealing with the government, it's vicious. It's terrible. They do things behind your back and you don't even know it's happening. Mm-hmm. And people called me and I talked to them and I explained to them what's going to happen, that hasn't happened to them already. But the advice is I tell them they have to have lawyers, employment lawyers that understand this and understand the system that they're fighting their case in. You just can't have a lawyer jump into a state case that does federal cases, or if lives in New York but's going to do a case in Texas. You can't. You have to have the right people in the right spots, and you have to find those people, and it takes time. But you got to know you have time on your side.
Tell me, what would you like to tell people about whistleblowers, Bobby?
In the beginning, Jay, I never, okay, come on, I'm from New York, I'm from Brooklyn. So when you hear whistleblower, you think the mafia rat, I'm a rat, but you're not.
No.
You're a person that just stood, you took an oath, you followed your path, and you said the truth, you said the truth, you spoke the truth, you brought a wrong forward. Like for me, I defended a coworker who was being sexually harassed and bullied and assaulted. And how is that bad? How am I a rat or a bad guy? Or how did I violate the blue wall? People hurt her. And I told the truth, and I protected her, and I helped her. And there's every one of these whistleblowers that come out are truth tellers. Mm-hmm. They're told the truth. They brought reality to everybody's face.
Yes. And
now people don't know what to do. Well, you wanted that. Why did we make policies and procedures about telling the truth and giving it a word of whistleblower? And then you went after people for doing that. Why? It's just odd as hell is that's what happens when you just tell the truth. And then when I told the truth and other hundreds of whistleblowers tell the truth, and then they start investigating all these allegations, they found out people were lying about me or us, and you did nothing to them.
Mm-hmm. That's the discouraging part, isn't it, Bobby?
It's horrible.
But we'll be hearing you somewhere down the road on one of our podcasts. And I want to thank you for appearing on National Whistleblower Week. You are a hero, Bobby, and no one can ever take that away from you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you for everything.
You bet, Bobby.